Hi, welcome to Dakota STEAM Learning's Intro to Engineering the Dakota STEAM Learning Way. So, we are very specific with how we design our engineering challenges and all of everything that we do, because everything that we do is really centered around having students get more practice with critical thinking and creativity, most importantly. But then we also integrate a high amount of ability to do communication and collaboration within the project because that's why STEAM is powerful. And so we never want them to just be only for fun. We want to be, of course, adding more learning into their day, but those are the main competencies that all of our challenges focus on. And then them building a tower or building anything else is secondary to them gaining those competencies. So the first thing I want to do is kind of review full versus short challenges. We design everything very intentionally, and after a lot of years of trials and tribulations, right? And so this one is all about full versions. So if you're confused which one you're doing, if you're confused which one you want to do, we do have slight variations between the two. So full versions are unique. I don't know that anyone anyone else is really content creating with full versions because this comes from my experience as a STEAM teacher for a long time. And I noticed, especially if you work in buildings with kids that have suffered a lot of trauma, that it's really hard for them to collaborate. And that was one of my main goals, was to get them better at collaborating. Well, if you ask them to collaborate without them getting to try their own idea first, it just can be a disaster and it's not fair to them. So that's my inspiration for full versions. And that's why you don't see it other places, is because it's really rooted in multiple years of trying things and realizing this just isn't fair to them. So full versions, students first make a small creation individually. It is related to the challenge. It's usually something smaller. So if they're making towers, they're only allowed to use so many supplies for that small version, and they get to take that one home. Usually, not always. Sometimes it's what I call a tear down, using blocks and things like that. So the other really important big part of this is this gives kids so much more schema because they have experienced the creating themselves. So instead of saying, oh, yeah, I've seen a bridge before, they've now tried to create one and they saw what was easy and what didn't work firsthand. So they use that knowledge to make a larger version afterwards. These are great for having students collaborate on the larger version. So, for example, if it's a bridge building challenge, they first make a small bridge themselves. They get to keep that one. Then they work on a much larger bridge in a group of 3 or whatever it is. So these take a long time because first they have to go through the process themselves and then they take their knowledge and they have to collaborate. You can definitely do full versions without collaboration. I still think they're really powerful. And we do them a lot actually without collaboration because it's important for kids to build that schema. And it teaches them so much when they have to evaluate their own work and then rebuild. And it's amazing to watch to see if they rebuild the same way or if they go to a completely new design. Short versions are where students only create one large solution. So they don't make the mini version, they just make the large solution. The biggest thing I always want to say is we do not ever recommend having students collaborate on an engineering project when they have not first gotten to try their own idea, because this leads to issues, leads to tears, it leads to all of those things that we want to avoid. And rightfully so on their part. They have not a lot of opportunities always to be tactile, just try their own ideas. And then you take that away from them by telling them they have to already negotiate a tough situation where you're choosing ideas between. So we have a lot of communication and collaboration built into this process to help them be successful, but they will not be successful unless you've given the opportunity to build themselves first. So Sorry, that got a little pedestal-y, but I am pretty unflinching in my in my beliefs in regards to that after my years teaching STEAM. So, moral of the story, full versions take a long time. Short versions still take about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, depending on what level of challenge you're doing. Wouldn't ever really recommend having less than that. But sometimes people see these amounts of time and they're like, well, I'm never going to do engineering because I don't have that amount of time. You can 100% split this into a week. That's how I typically do it. With a full version, it's 100% a week. I love doing short versions altogether because I think that's really powerful for students, but you can absolutely cut those in half too. So I will, when I'm going through this, give you natural stopping points so that you know. Okay. So, all of our, not all of our lessons at this point, but eventually probably all of our lessons will have a follow along lesson too that early on you can click on it. And instead of teaching using our slides, you can follow on with me leading you through the lesson as well. So look for those. They're not in every lesson yet, but they're coming. All right. So let's get into the nitty gritty of you're going through an engineering with us. What do I do? What can I expect? So we always start by telling students that we're going to present them with a big question and their job is to try and solve it. They're going to use their schema, meaning background knowledge, and new information to create a prototype to a solution to our problem. And the biggest thing we always want, the other thing other than those 4 C's that we always want happening when we're teaching STEAM is growth mindset. This is the perfect place to have students persevere and learn how to have grit and things like that. So, the very first thing or first step of our engineering design process, which I said is not exactly like other people's, so I hope you're not expecting that, is we have them ask. We define the problem and we learn key information. So, for this one, we're always going to start with the problem that's being asked. Everything is presented as a question, and that's why they're STEAM challenges, not activities. Then we have students write down the problem that they're solving. Sometimes we give you 2 versions of our STEAM journal always. All the pages have the information already input that could be input for students, and we also have a blank version. So that's up to you. If you're doing kindergarten, do you want to spend 20 minutes having them write down a problem? That's up to you. If that's like a good use of their time at that point in the year, then I love it. But if not, and it's not a good use of their time during that point of the year, even up to 5th grade, sometimes it's not a good use of their time. Then we do have that version that already has it documented for them. So that's what I love about everything that we do. We try and be so intentional because we are teachers. And so we try and be really intentional so that no matter what your goal during this lesson is, you have the resources to help you do that. And you get to make all the decisions for your students because you're the one who knows them best and their needs best. So after we tell them what the problem is, we have them imagine. So this is where they're going to do what we call initial exploration, which is that small first build by themselves. But before they can do that is we want to hit that schema. So we pose questions to students about relevant information related to the challenge, and they're posed to initiate discussion. They're posed with the intention that you would then lead students through a discussion, typically starting in pairs, moving into whole group usually. And we recommend using your typical discussion structure. Here's an example of us making sure that communication is being highlighted in collaboration and pointing out to students that a lot of times we learn more from others than we do from our teachers, and that's important. So really getting them comfortable with the idea of sharing ideas with other kids too, because STEAM works best that way. And then we allow them, after sharing, to document anything that they want to remember, basically. What is something helpful that they want to make sure that they remember for this process? And we always include lines and boxes because we know that every learner is different. And we also know that you as a teacher might have expectations for students. Like my 3rd grader, I would expect her to write in sentences because that is the main thing that we're focusing on right now, right? Whereas my 1st grader, I would allow him to draw a picture and then write phrases. So that's where that differentiation comes in as well. So, and that's really important to us. So it's trying to meet kids where they're at, and you make those expectations for them. And we always make that clear if you're doing follow along videos. We are very, very specific on making clear that we always follow our personal teacher's rules. After that, if your challenge involves a figurine, so like examples of things that would require figurines, if you're doing a boat building challenge and part of the requirements is that a penguin has to stay inside the boat, then this is where you'd make that penguin. We always try and make your life easy as possible, not asking you to go buy a penguin, right? If you want to buy a penguin, the kids would love it, but we always want to give you the resources in case you don't have that ability or time, because we've been there. So this would be an example of a figurine, and we give them directions on there of how to cut it out and star to star so that it stands up. After that, this is where we go into the initial exploration. This is where they get to do that first build. And so it's really powerful for kids to get a question and without a lot of debate, them get to try. And so this is where we give them the criteria for success, which is really important. We give them the constraints. These are going to be very similar to later on with the big build, which is really nice. They usually slightly change, but they're pretty similar. And then we tell them how many materials. In an initial exploration, a lot of times we do limit materials. You can only use this many, you can only use that many, because we don't want this to be a 2-hour build. This is designed to be quick. Typically, the goal with these builds is they're 30, max 45 minutes from diagramming to build, like end of the building testing. So we try and limit stuff just so that it's fast. And then we have the students diagram. Diagramming is something that I'm super passionate about. You will always see a lot of diagramming in anything Dakota STEAM does, because diagramming is such a powerful way for students to be doing critical thinking, because not only are they coming up with the design, but they're having to really think about what material would work best. And that is such a powerful skill for them, because they're constantly weighing and comparing and doing all of these higher level skills when really all they're doing is diagramming. Diagramming makes them integrate so many skills. And that's why I'm really passionate about it, if you haven't noticed. So we have them do a diagram. Once again, we've got with the materials filled out, or if you're going to switch up materials, we also have it blank so that you can put in what materials you're going to allow students to use. And after that, we let them build. We let them go. This is where we don't put a timer in there, because you're going to you will know how much time your students need. But typically, like I said, we try and do 20 to 30 minutes of active build time. That's how small these first projects are. So we always like to have a slide up here where you can, annotate on your board and tell them this is when we're done. This is a great slide to put a little timer in, stuff like that, so that they know and they are very well aware. When they're done with theirs, then what we do is we move into analyze. And it's really important for them to know that when we are looking at our projects, what we're really doing is analyzing them. We're getting a new experience with them, and we're going to see, and this is going to impact our later builds. So if you are cutting in like I said, 5 hours is a crazy amount of time. So what I recommend is day one, cut before you test, because you want that testing results really stuck in their mind when they move to the next one. So I typically, day one, I have 50 minutes to an hour. Day one, I have them build it and I have them put it somewhere safe for day two. And so we get them all lined up and then they chill. Then the next day we come back. If you have 5 hours, I'm super jealous. And then I'd keep going. So the next thing we do is it's time to test those initial explorations. So what we're looking for is failure points. So failure points are the aspect that's causing it to fail. This is another insane critical thinking. Asking kids to figure out why something doesn't work is really important. And then it allows us to start to sort that and find patterns between different ones. So you have to create a safe space where kids aren't afraid to fail, of course. And STEAM is a beautiful place to do that because STEAM is full of failures. Everything's a prototype, right? So I always tell students, I'm stoked when my initial exploration fails because that means I'm going to learn so much. So we normalize failing on initial explorations hard. Like we really focus on it. Like, do not be sad if you fail. Then we can all learn. So I like to do a lot of initial exploration testing whole group if your students have the ability to do that. If not, I pick like 4 very strategically, like this one, like 2 that are going to fail for the same reason so they can see that pattern, and 2 that are very similar, or and then one that's not going to fail, and then ones that's going to fail in a different way so they can start to see this mixture. And so we do the actual testing. We always tell you exactly how to set up that testing. They record their testing results. And then this is where those patterns where you very specifically point out specific ones and start sorting them as a class. This is where it comes in key because I love doing this. I love making a physical poster of it where we stick sticky notes and we identify failure points together, and then we identify must-haves. I noticed that everyone that was successful all had supports between their beams, things like that. So they know next time if we don't have supports between our beams, we know it's not going to work. Just really being very specific with it. And a lot of times early in the year, I model this. So I model my thought process when I'm looking for failure points. I model my thought process when I'm looking for must-haves. I model me looking for patterns and things that work and patterns and things that don't. And then by the end of the year, like honestly, you guys, by the end of the year, kindergartners can do this. It's amazing to watch them if you do multiple of these projects in this way. Have students document it. Like I said, if you don't want to have them documented by hand, you can do this up on a smartboard. You can do this on with Post-its on an actual poster. After that, we move into research because now they have a schema, they have initial exploration results that they're analyzing in their brain, and then we're going to add some research onto. So, an example of research could look something like this. This is for bridges. This is an example of an arch bridge research page that we use with students so they can start to analyze. Once again, we always try and have them notice things first, and then we tell them what to look for after. After that, we have students just jot down anything that they feel is necessary to remember after research. Sometimes this is a lot of times when I'm teaching, this is the end of day 2 for me. Oh, no, sorry. It's not the end of day 2. This is getting towards the end of day 2. The next thing that we do is we move on to the planning stage. And in the planning stage, this is where you go over those for the big one, the criteria for success and the constraints. And you tell them what materials. A lot of times, this time the material is not limited. And then I have them diagram. And I have them diagram by themselves. I review a diagram. Pictures are pretty. Diagrams tell important information about materials. And I use this to help them. Early on in the year, you'll get a lot of kids will ask, I'm drawing the Eiffel Tower. No. So I always try and tell them, no, you're not drawing the Eiffel Tower. You're drawing your idea. This is just an example of how you do it. So then this is the end of day 2 for me. I have them draw their diagram. So they draw out their diagram based on everything they know, based on um, all of the information they've gotten. What do you think that final one should look like? And I have them cite their reasoning. Is it still based on schema? Is it based on their initial exploration results? Is it based on research? What is their main one? Telling them that the goal should be at least 2 of those. You should have 2 reasons why you think this is going to work. And this is typically where I stop day 2. So I had an hour the first day where they built. Day 2, unfortunately, sometimes can be the tough day because you got to do the testing, but it's very teacher led this day. If you have more time, I recommend to keep going, but it's not always possible. Then day 3 comes and we take these sheets out And here's where we're going to hit hard on collaboration, hard on communication, hard on critical thinking, because we use what we call the what and why protocol when we are doing everything, but especially in engineering. So they are then going to be with their group. So I'm going to assume for the sake of this video that you're then going to have them work in a group to make the big one. But if you're not, it's totally fine, and don't skip this step, because it's really still important for them to learn how to have the communication skills to describe their ideas and have the communication skills to give people feedback. So don't, even if you're going to have them do a full version and this big build is still by themselves, which there's nothing wrong with, never a bad idea. I honestly like to switch back and forth, make them work in a group. Next time we do a big build, let them work by themselves. I like to have that switch so that they're not always having to work in a group, because it can be really overwhelming for certain personalities, but also having them know that those skills are important and we do need to work on them. So if you're having them work in a group, they're going to go through and share this way. If you're not, you're just having them get feedback and having them, their friend help them, or a classmate help them see issues or triumphs inside of yours, which is really important. And it's a great classroom culture aspect too. So I'm going to take them through, and they're going to focus on the what and why protocol. What will their creation look like, and why do you think that they'll work? This is a sneaky way to also have them work on citing evidence, which is always amazing, and it links back to every other subject matter so well. So you have one student share. The other student is not allowed to talk. I set a timer for 30 seconds early in the year and 1 minute late in the year where they have to talk for the whole time. Then we talk about giving helpful feedback. So having them understand that when we give feedback, it's not about you, it's about your idea, and those are not the same thing. And so, really having respectful discussions and creating a place where you can tell people concerns in a positive way. So we have them, and this is also great analytical skills where this other student is having to really think about, do I think this would be successful or would I not? So it's communication and critical thinking while building positive collaboration skills. That's why I love this step so much, but it's not always the easiest to teach. So then they have 30 seconds to give them feedback. Same thing, end of the year, I make them talk for a minute. All right. So you're going to you're going to repeat this process until every student has shared. My recommendation always is to have groups of 3 when building, if you're going to work in a team. If you're just having them work by themselves, I would just pair up 2 students, just because this can get lengthy. But if you're going to have them work in a team, I always recommend having 3 students in a group. The reason being, because there's no natural 2 and 2. There's no natural, well, we're on this team and we're on this team. 3 makes them really, really have to all work together. Also, if one kid's absent, you at least still have 2 left, and 5 is just huge. So that's why I recommend 3. In all of my years, I started with 4, and I was not a fan. 3 has always given me the best results. So after they've all shared, the next step is we move on to a team plan. Once again, if you're having students make their own idea, then have them edit their diagram based on feedback, and then skip everything that is related to a team plan. So, team plan is where we really have them understand that it's not about us anymore, it's about everyone, and it's not about us, it's about plans. So, then I have this slide to remind them what they can do when they have different ideas, because they're always going to have different ideas. So, they can choose one person's idea, they can combine ideas, or they can create a new one. I always encourage combining ideas because they typically have different strengths and weaknesses. Also, when I'm building teams, I kind of know that about them, right? Then their job is to complete a team diagram together. So in the STEAM journal for full versions, we always have a team diagram sheet. I would only print out 8 of those, or however many teams you're going to have. Typically, the most teams I usually had was 11, right? So typically, the most I usually had was 11. So I would print 11 of those on cardstock, because they do have to last a few days sometimes. Then we go into collaboration strategies. And the two that we highlight is stick together, where everyone's working on the same thing at the same time, or separate and dominate, where each person kind of has a zone of the engineer and then they're putting it all together. So we have them choose whichever, or they can come up with a new one. We always emphasize to them, no matter which one, you're always still talking to each other, you're always still helping each other, and you're always still checking in with each other. So then they identify for us which collaboration strategy they're going to use. And honestly, that's more than anything just to spark a discussion about who feels confident about doing certain things. Then we like to review, reminding them that how can each of them help their team, and reminding them that no matter what, everyone's creating. You may be doing other things as well, but everyone's creating. Everyone's hands are on there. And then we always have a collaboration expectations slide, just to remind them that even when even though we're working together, we still have to keep it focused. Then we go into the fun part where and I still try and have this be in day 3. Usually half of day 3, we start with finalizing their team plan and then moving in. And I always like to give them at least 20 minutes to build that first day of creating together. So then this is where we move into step number 5, just a few engineering reminders to help them. And then I like to end day 3 on a check-in, just so that I kind of know, and I just kind of have a temperature gauge, and I number my teams, and I know like, oh, tomorrow I really need to start by checking in with 3 and 7 or whatever it is. Then this is how I start day 4 as well. I start day 4. There's a place for them to do it too, so you can kind of review that. Then I start day 4, having them build for 20 minutes, doing another check-in, and then having build again for 20 minutes. That is when, that second part too, is when I start to get them, if I'm noticing they're getting to a pretty decent place, I move them into mini testing. So mini testing is them trying out their idea, but not the full test, because we don't want things to be breaking all crazy. So like if it's something that has to hold weight, we start with just a little bit of weight. What are you noticing? Are your beams moving? Is this support attached? Things like that. So, and we have these little checklist questions to help students really evaluate it. So I like to keep this up on the screen so that even if students aren't quite to the mini testing, they know what they need to be thinking about. And then as they mini test, they have a place where they can really be reflecting on what changes needs to be made because of the mini testing. And once the teams have all kind of mini tested, this is when I would really tell them when final testing is happening. So a bunch of you have mini tested, final testing is going to be in 18 minutes, things like that. And this is really dependent on if it's day 4 or day 5. Sometimes final testing is day 4. Sometimes it's day 5. It's just how long you're going to give them to build that big one. And it really just depends on how big that last project is. Sometimes they power through because there's a lot of them, and sometimes it actually takes them longer. So it's hard to know. And final testing is, we always tell you exactly how to set it up. They have a place in their journal to document it. I do think that testing sometimes is intimidating. As a teacher, like, how do I set this up? And we give you testing recommendations in our tips and tricks. So I will talk to you about that in just a second, but just know that we always give you a lot of resources to help you with this step, because I know it can be overwhelming. And we have students do that. They document how they did. It won't say requirement 1. It'll have very specific things. And then we have them share, because we want to get back to that communication again, right? So this is where we have students communicate their results and their reflections and their surprises. And sometimes they do it whole class, rarely, honestly, just due to time. Usually I do it jigsaw style. So I have them meeting with people from other groups and they're sharing in that way. You could have the whole group share together, but my favorite way to do it is have their team all brainstorm together types of things they want to say, and then they all go apart. So then every single kid is having to communicate about their group's project. That is exactly how it ends for engineering. So, and remember, this is the full version. Each one comes with a tips and tricks video specific to that project. So it has a specific tips and tricks. You will get to see common struggles and what you could do to help. You'll get to see student examples, what you can expect. I do not recommend showing student examples to students because then they're going to make that one. Instead, it's good for you to have it in your mind so you can see, oh, what kind of questioning could I do to help them be successful? And I break down testing and how to set that up specific to that project. So, lots of resources for you as a teacher. All of these lessons, if we are selling them, that means we've taught them a lot of times. I know it can be hard to teach someone else's content, and that's why we provide so many resources to help you be successful. We want every kid to have positive STEAM experiences because I think that they can really lead to the next generation being so much stronger in terms of critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. And that is why we're super passionate about it. And so we want to have high quality STEAM education accessible to everyone. So we hope that we can be a piece of the puzzle to help you feel confident teaching STEAM in your classroom. We always include blank slides so that you can personalize anything you need to within our lessons because we're teachers too, and we know that sometimes that's necessary. All right, I hope that our resources and our lessons are really helpful for you and you have an awesome, awesome school year.